Beach State College. So we're in Palm Beach County. We're one of the 28. You'll hear about that, 28 state colleges. So we service Palm Beach County with 5 campuses. And so when we partnered with Pure Air, I said, I'm not going to make this easy. I want a project manager that isn't just an IAQ specialist. I want him to be a lawyer and a pro wrestler. And there you have it. They go, no problem, Frank Santini. Look at that mix of his background. And it has been such a pleasure working with Frank. So, gang, we all deserve the t-shirt. We have survived and are surviving the pandemic. You could tell I've been around a while. I've been through a lot of things. .com burst, remember that craziness? And the housing bubble burst and all. Nothing like this in my entire career. And this talk is a little different because what I wanted to share with you is we all went through the first year, right, where we locked down and we went virtual. Our problem was about this time last year, our president said, we cannot remain virtual. As a state community college, our distinctive is face-to-face. That's how we serve our students. That's how we help transform lives, because we do public safety training, health sciences training. We do teach the trades. You can't do welding remotely, virtually. So she says, you gotta come back. Well, the problem was this was gonna be a different kind of building project. All of us, we build buildings, we build processes, systems, teams. But this time, I found I had to build trust, confidence, and commitment. Because the bottom line was faculty had been teaching remotely for a year and loved it, and they didn't want to come back. Can anybody relate to that? So where do you start? So you heard the president initiated a return to campus task force. I was part of the leadership team. There were 3 folks, leaders, head of facilities, head of safety and security, and then a rep from the president's office. And it was a blast working together with Dr. Delsa Bush, safety and security, Rachel Bonlaren, and we really got through it together, had a great task force. You all know this, you've done this, right? The communication, state of the college forums, virtually. Do you remember when it first started? Does my laptop have a camera? Do I have a mic? We wouldn't even, now it's like, come on. All of a sudden my Lenovo camera didn't work on my laptop. I went into shock, panic because of all my Teams meetings. So the help desk said, so Bob, if you look on top, you see the little switch by the camera? My camera has a switch? And I had switched it off. Anyway, but you know where your camera is now, right? Because virtually, this is how we do it. So each forum, we'd have our return to campus update. We send out weekly COVID updates. We're a state college. We cannot require you to wear a mask. I liked when I drove onto UNF. We are expecting you, all ospreys, to be what? Did you see? Vaccinated. Expecting. We came up with that same word. Then the new sign is, wear your mask. All right? But we couldn't require it. We can't mandate it. Then, of course, you all have been through the safety protocols. But here's where it started. Facing in face-to-face learning fears, it starts with awareness. We're facility folks, right? A lot of times we don't get it. How many have sat down with faculty and have a good close friend as a faculty member? Ooh, good. 1. That's a problem, right? We are not aware of what the fears even are. So we have to listen. Are facility people good listeners? No, we like to bring answers, right? And then you question us, we get a little defensive. This area disinfecting card hasn't moved in 3 days. How do I know it's been disinfected? Get over it. The card's there, deal with it. That's kind of how we listen. And then the other is, there has to be a forum for dialogue. Because let's face it, we don't talk to faculty enough. Or students. So here's the real issues. And it took me getting close to some faculty to get it. And they said, all right, Bob, you're being vulnerable. I'm a Brene Brown fan. Any Brene Brown fans? Yes! I love her. You need to read her, Dare to Lead. Incredible. You know, courage over comfort, all this stuff. Awesome. Anyway, faculty member says, you don't know what it's like. Now, this is a year ago. You are asking me to come back to campus, walk into a room because we're talking full capacity. Students who may or may not be wearing masks, who may or may not be vaccinated, sitting less than 3 feet apart. And you want me to feel safe in this building that's 40 years old. And the air handler rattles. I may get sick. And I may bring it home to my family. And I take care of my aged mother. And she cannot afford to get this thing. Online is much safer for me. And I was like, wow, that's the fear. How many can relate to that? How many have heard that? That's a message, gang. So this is what we're going to share of what we did and how we got through it. But first off, a quick discussion question, because we do want to hear from you. Who would, 1 or 2 of you share biggest challenge of the pandemic that you faced, right where you were? 1 or 2. Biggest challenge.
Well, one thing I saw, go ahead.
At the very beginning is getting materials to go ahead and even implement anything.
Was that not brutal? When the president called me and said, Bob, I hear you are putting hand sanitizer in every classroom. I just walked through 3. I don't see any. And then she really enjoyed the excuses, right? Very good. You couldn't get stuff. Frank, go ahead.
Anybody else? Yes. Let me.
Yes.
And 95 masks. Yeah.
Exactly. And then our health and safety guy said, they're respirators. Right? We can't give that without training. Or fit tested. Or then the CDC said, save it, please. It's got to be for health professionals. 1 or 2 other challenges. Yes.
Fear from the employees showing up to work. Yep.
One of the most embarrassing things for me, I'm on the task force, right? And we were proud we didn't have a spread on campus until 4 of my facility guys showed up positive. So I'm sitting in a task force meeting. Bob, facilities, 4 positives. So we evaluated things. We had to change some stuff. Turned out that crew was eating together, no masks, sitting next to each other as if no pandemic. And so we changed some things. So we've had challenges, gang. So for me, the big one was there really it was fear of exposure. Not so much now, but it's there, right? When we hear China locking down again and different things, doubt the safety of our buildings. How many had indoor air quality issues before the pandemic? We did, right? Palm Beach State, we're getting ready to celebrate 90 years. And we have buildings are pretty old. So we had issues before the pandemic. So people are in there, they're doubting the safety of the space they're sitting in. And they doubted the facility team. Could you imagine that? Sometimes we're not viewed as the smartest people around. And that perception is wrong, right? But it's out there. And basically not wanting to come back to work. That's the hard part. Okay, so this was kind of a breakthrough for me. And this was the Healthy Buildings program. And I thank FLAPPA, by the way, because I was first introduced to Pure Air at FLAPPA. Okay, so even before I came to Palm Beach State in 2018, our guys had met the Pure Air folks, Frank especially, at FLAPPA. And then do you remember FLAPPA 2020 March at University of South Florida where it shut down during the conference? It was like, it happened right at FLAPPA. But this is my legacy at Palm Beach State. So they hired me 3 years in, and I'm 66, and my wife says, "You're the hope of the future." And, only a wife could get away with that. But I want to create a culture of environmental health, safety, and productivity, not a knee-jerk reaction to a pandemic. A culture of environmental health, safety, productivity. Because we could throw out a bunch of stuff, right? Filters and all that, and then put them away eventually. So Pure Control Services was a big part of this and the Healthy Buildings program. So I tell you, it was a godsend for me that we had a connection. And here was the thing. Again, notice my perspective. This talk was building trust, confidence, and commitment. So when the campus heard that we partnered with people with microbiologists that have their own laboratory, industrial hygienists, and IEQ specialists, they thought facilities just got smarter. So I'm going to hand it off to Frank, who's going to talk us through what the Healthy Buildings program is, and we're going to volley back and forth a little bit.
Great, thank you, Bob. So the program started out with assessments. Now, when I say assessments, I mean we wanted to assess just about every building on campus, except a couple that aren't being used that much or there's no classrooms in those buildings. And then from there, based on the results of the assessment, the data gathered, then identify and remediate indoor air quality deficiencies,
Frank, I'll give you
HVAC
this
deficiencies, as we see them. And through the program, as you'll see here, we also included in-room HEPA filtration and the indoor air quality monitoring for the future. So creating a healthier college campus, one building at a time. And that starts again with the assessments, both indoor air quality assessments and an HVAC assessment. Now, what's an indoor air quality assessment? Well, getting a really good baseline of each building. Doesn't mean you're testing every single room, but representative areas of each facility from an indoor air quality perspective. Mold, bacterial, particulates, infrared imaging, the temperature, relative humidity, carbon dioxide, basic indoor air quality parameters, and then of course having industrial hygienists on staff and they're on site doing a visual inspection to catch obvious issues and also latent issues that the staff may not be aware of. Here's an example of a chart of some of the particulate and other types of contaminant sources we're looking for in these indoor air quality baseline investigations. And then we also go through and look at every single air handler on campus, a visual inspection, and also representative areas of ductwork to get an understanding of the sanitary conditions of the ductwork as well. And through this process, we really understand where we are from a baseline perspective, both from the HVAC perspective and indoor air quality. I think of, going to the doctor. If you go to the doctor and the doctor says, well, maybe you're 40 years old, 50 years old. Hey, Frank, you're 40 years old now, you might need a lung transplant. What are you talking about, a lung transplant? Well, back in the caveman days, men only lived till they were 30 years old, and you're 10 years past your useful life. So it's time to take those old lungs out and replace them with new lungs. What would you do in that scenario? You get the heck out of there! You run as fast as you could, right? You want to take my lungs out because they're just too old? Please. So you want to measure, you want to do diagnostic examinations, CAT scans, breathing tests, whatnot, and the same scenario applies here. You want to understand what actually is going on, what are the conditions inside your buildings, so then you can make educated decisions about moving forward. Another part of this assessment piece was building envelope assessments, understanding the leakage and where there might be intrusion throughout the building envelope of the facilities. That affects not only indoor air quality, but also energy usage, especially in South Florida. So we went through and assessed 74 different buildings across Palm Beach State College. And then as we went through, we understood where there were deficiencies from a sanitary perspective for the air handlers and for the ductwork. And we also understood from a perspective of classroom occupancy and how certain systems were operating, mechanical systems, where HEPA filtration would be most appropriate in classrooms and laboratories throughout for in-room devices. And we also understood from a perspective of continuous monitoring where we can place sensors around each classroom to continuously monitor indoor air quality after these changes have been implemented, so we can continuously understand and keep that baseline going, so Bob and his team would know and be able to react to problems as they came up instead of being reactive. So validation and visualization.
Thanks, Frank. So I call this seeing is believing, right? So how many install bipolar ionization on air handlers as an example? How many changed out MERV 8 to 13s? So you tell people that, right? And do they see it? No. So we saw the need for what I call the validation and visualization phase. So, we've all seen this, our disinfection after a positive exposure and all. But thanks to Dr. Sahai, the microbiologist with Pure Air, he said, Bob, do you know we do have a swab test for the SARS-CoV-2 virus? So we partnered them with our custodial team, and we randomly are sampling after the disinfection protocol, sending those samples to the lab, and we hope for negative, no COVID-2 there. And so far, that's what we've been getting. So what we did was we're validating the cleaning protocol. Because they get the emails, area disinfected, ready to reopen. Now these folks have access to Google. So, they're all reading and seeing, and they say, what do you mean disinfected, right? So they start questioning things. But when we're able to say we have a lab test backing this up, this protocol, that's validation. The other thing was, okay, there are so many on the market, gang. I am not selling anything here. I'm just saying what we did. And we went for wall mounted, and these are Aramax units. We didn't want them necessarily on the floor. But here's the thing that we liked as far as, it's filtering down to very small particles. We know the SARS-CoV-2 virus is one of the smallest ones out there. By the way, we were talking energy earlier in the keynote, and all we did was focus on energy management, right? We actually shut down our chiller plants on a Friday, opened them up early on a Monday. That was our protocol before the pandemic. And again, working with Pure, saying, guys, you go more than 12 hours, you in South Florida, you're going to have problems. So we've changed that. So now it's that tough balance, though, between energy and pandemic and healthy buildings, right? So there's got to be a balance. So we are running it more, but if we're doing it more efficiently, I've been really monitoring our utility bills. And so far, they're up a little, but not what you might think, actually.
Also, Bob, another piece of this equation was not only balancing the energy piece, but we all were told bring in more outside air to the buildings.
Yeah.
And in South Florida, bringing in more outside air, if it's not done properly, can lead to more microbials, particularly mold growth. So that's another balancing act that Palm Beach State and lots of other schools that we dealt with had to go through to make sure they're getting that airflow, getting those air changes, but also not creating a mold problem instead of a virus problem.
Really good. I tell you, here's the thing that has saved me the most, and faculty members seeing a dashboard in their classroom. And we actually did, those weekly COVID updates, we actually sent out what the colors mean. When they see an amber, it just means that it's ramping up to pull down the particulate matter. Red is letting us know, hey, change filters. But they're able to see a dashboard of air quality in their room. So I was told by our mechanical engineers that, you know what, Bob, most of your systems are designed for 1 air change per hour in the energy mode, energy savings mode. So what CDC, ASHRAE recommend right now? Is it 4 as a minimum air changes per hour? So these Aeromax units add 3, and their size, there's 3 different sizes. We get the cubic feet of the room. A room like this might have 2 or 3 in there, and it's actually sized to add back those 3 additional air changes. So we're serious about this. I've even told my boss, I said, get ready, baby, because there's going to be about $200,000 more of filters in my budget next year. And he says, okay, I get it, because I'm telling them early, because we're in this thing. We're not going to leave them up there and shut them off after the pandemic's gone, because we had mold, indoor air quality issues before the pandemic. Now we have a baseline. We want to go forward. Then this IAQ guard, we're just getting ready to install this, and this will be kind of a supplement to our building management system, and our head controls guy is real excited about this. Again, catching things early. We're designing a dashboard that's going to go on our digital monitors in the building, so as folks walk in the building, they could see air quality of the building. That's scary, right? It can be scary. So I'm leading more towards vulnerability, okay? And where I sent a test to one of our deans, all she went to was the red, the outlier. I said, well, we've remediated that, we've done that. So we've learned some things. We're going to have to be careful how we share the info. But this thing I need to turn over to Frank, because I got to share this. Remember, I've been on the consulting end about 30 years of my career. I've been a business owner, engineering owner, process design firm owner in Cincinnati, Ohio. And, you sell really well, and then it's like, good news, bad news, guys. Hey, we got the job. Bad news is we got the job. And imagine how many schools are approaching firms like Pure Air for this. So what was my fear? My fear was we're going to get lost. Okay, they got it. We got the board approved, the funding. We got them going, and we'd be one of many. And guys, I'm just here to say today, somehow, through this whole thing from April 2021 to today, I have felt like Pure Air's only client. And they ain't paying me nothing for this. This is reality. And from day one, Frank Santini has been my single source contact, has not changed as a vice president. And we stayed on schedule. So the president's like, you're going to install all those units by August, Bob, when classes start? And I'd say, yes. And I'd go home and not sleep, right? That this is going to be done, that we're going to do all these baseline checks. So I'm going to hand off to Frank now to say what his life was like once they got the contract.
Let me just say, Bob, I appreciate those comments. I did have an unhappy wife at home on some nights because I was working so much. One thing about the pandemic was obviously a lot of influx of funding into higher education and school districts. And so we've been doing this 38 years, so we're doing this a long time, and our business was growing pretty rapidly even before the pandemic. And so the influx of funding from schools and colleges opened up a lot of opportunities for us, for a lot of our clients who had been wanting to do more with us and now had the funding to do so. Obviously an emphasis on IAQ-related projects as we went through here. Separately, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, there's also been more widespread adoption of our HVAC restoration program in healthcare and higher ed. And so that also was part of the business increase we faced. And finally, cooperative purchasing opportunities, state contracts, different cooperatives like E&I, and others that are out there that allow for easy purchasing. So all these sort of factors came together to greatly increase our business. And so there's a challenge of execution there, as Bob was alluding to. You want to make sure you're meeting the demands and satisfying and exceeding expectations for every single client you deal with. And so in my mind, the way you do that is have a system that works already in place. And we had that. We had a very detailed process for how we assess buildings, how those data gets communicated to the client, and how remediation is done in response to the data we gather out in the field. We also, of course, have a lot of intensive training for the folks that come in and work with us, and also not having a single point of failure. There are many, many people on my team, including Tanner there in the back and Addison right here, who can share responsibilities. And so there's not one person who's responsible for one thing, and if that person's sick or has other obligations, somebody else is trained up to come in and step into that person's place, so there's never a ball being dropped. And of course, work ethic. You can't overcome that. When you find people out there that come to your team, you got to make sure they have a good work ethic. And I think we all know that from our experience here in facilities. Our people who are out there working with us, we need them to be able to dial in. And also celebrating victories too. I didn't put that on there, but when you have a victory, you celebrate it. Client satisfied, you get something done. Like in this case, for Bob and his team, our goal was to assess all 74 buildings before the fall semester started. And that was a challenge given all the other obligations we had for different clients, but we found a way to do it, and when we did it, the building science team who did the assessments was celebrated for their accomplishment. And that makes it a big deal for them. So one example of a process we already had in place was something we call HVAC New Life. And this is a process in which we look at and examine air handlers and rooftop units for potential candidacy to be restored or refurbished as opposed to being replaced. And the best way I can describe it is this man right here. Everybody know Tom Brady? Woo! Yeah. I'm a Buffalo Bills fan, so I could, But for folks who are not a football fan here, Tom Brady is widely recognized as the greatest professional football player of all time. He has won 7 Super Bowls. He won't be winning any more Super Bowls, but he's won 7. So Tom Brady in 2014 was 37 years old. And by and large, at 37, your career is done as a professional football player. And that's what his team at the time, the Patriots, thought. And so they invested a great deal of draft capital on another quarterback named Jimmy Garoppolo, a young, strapping 22-year-old. Because they figured, Tom Brady's getting old, it's probably just about done. But they were only looking at age. They didn't look at the fact that Tom Brady had one of his best years the year before. They didn't look at Tom Brady's preventative maintenance on his body, how well and disciplined he is about his diet and how well he keeps up his exercise routine. And they didn't look at the fact that his mental capacity is one of the best out there in terms of how he processes information on the football field. So they just looked at age and they wasted their draft capital because they ended up trading that pick away a few years later because Tom Brady kept on going. He won 4 Super Bowls after they were trying to replace him. You can imagine that. So the same concept applies to this program for HVAC. We don't look at just age. Of course, it's a factor, but we look at the actual conditions. How well has it been maintained? How is it performing now as compared to what it's supposed to be performing at? And what's the demand put on the equipment? And most importantly, is it capable of an extension of life? And here's a few photographs. I'll just scroll through here as we're speaking of just examples of interior and exterior photos of air handler units. This is from a FLAPPA member here, and I won't say which one, but you can see, you might look at this and see the Swamp Thing type of drain pan and think, oh man, you better replace that thing. But in this situation, they not only had microbial growth, but the sheet metal was completely worn away here. But the air handler was located in a very difficult location. It was in the back of a mechanical room with 3 other air handlers in front of it. So replacing it was really a difficult obstacle to climb. So refurbishment made a lot of sense for that reason and many other reasons. Here's an example of this is actually a healthcare scenario. We had interior insulation, again moldy, and also a fan that kept breaking down on that facility director. He was calling me on Saturday nights before this happened, said, Frank, I can't keep getting called away from my wife on Saturday night because my blower keeps breaking down. And so the redundancy of having a fan wall or fan array retrofit for him made a lot of sense because he didn't have to worry about the emergencies of losing that single point of failure. Here's another example of a scenario with fan arrays. So as I go through here and show you these photographs, it's just examples of some folks may look at these air handlers and think, oh, man, let's just replace this baby. But that's not always the case. You do an examination. Is the metal box, is the air handler itself capable of being restored? And if it is, then there's an opportunity to keep the life going and extend that life, obviously for a lot less capital investment than there would be to replace the equipment. I'll mention a couple things about ductwork too as part of the program. Air changes are a big deal when it came to coronavirus funding. And what you don't realize a lot of times is when you have dirty ductwork, it's not just a sanitary issue, it's potentially an airflow issue because you have these obstacles like turning vanes and VAVs and reheat coils inside this ductwork that become filled with particulate. And so when you're doing an examination of ductwork, you also think about, am I affecting the ability to actually get air through the system because of obstructions in the ductwork? There's actually been white papers about this by the National Air Duct Cleaning Association, not only on airflow, but energy loss because of obstructions inside ductwork. So these are all kinds of things that take place and are analyzed as part of an analysis of a building and how healthy it is and what needs to be done in response to it. So with that, let me go back to Bob here for the last part of the presentation. Oh yeah.
Great. So, CARES Act, that's what it stands for, by the way. I never knew what it was. Coronavirus Aid, Relief, Economic. So, CARES Act. By the way, we just got extended another year on CARES Act funding. And I think that was across the board, so check that out. But this is a generational opportunity because folks at the college told me, Bob, we had talked about this for years. There's just no funding for it. Well, we had funding for it now, so we're taking advantage of it. The cool thing is there's other side effects. How many on campus find your IT group updating classroom technology using CARES Act 2? I mean, we have stuff everywhere. We have such a storage problem right now. But this is great, right? We're taking advantage of it. Remember our goal: trust, confidence, commitment. Now, I got to tell you this was, to me, the biggest surprise, the most fun of a pandemic. Totally unexpected. But conversations with Bob. So morale got pretty low April last year, kind of at the end of spring semester, going into summer. The pres had put down the gauntlet, you're coming back. And there was like a rebellion going on, and our task force sat around, can we do? I volunteer and say, I think we need a weekly conversation, and it'll be educational. And we had conversations with Bob every Friday from 9 to 10 for 16 weeks. And it was like a talk show. I opened it up in the chat for comments. I got to tell you, gang, in the first 2 weeks, the chat was so ugly, I thought I'd be pulled off the air. I mean, people were hateful. And you know what I did? I leaned in, baby. I reached out to the most hateful person on the chat, faculty, and had one-to-one meetings with them. And I'd say, you said this in the chat. A lot of them said, did I really? Wow, that's mean. I said, yeah, like to 100 and something people. So these were open Teams meetings, voluntary, and I had the Florida Department of Health of Palm Beach County Director, Dr. Alina Alonso, was my guest twice. She is the bomb. If you ever have a talk show, you want to get Dr. Alonso as your guest. And people loved it. But I got to share this with you. This was the one with Pure Air. So we were just letting the campus community know. Who was the most upset faculty-wise, by the way? It was our health science faculty. They said, you don't understand the science of this. Until they heard Dr. Sahai, a microbiologist for Pure Air, speaking about it and what we were doing. And I actually got emails separately saying, wow, Bob, that made such a difference to me. So we went through this, and
I tell you, Bob,
yeah,
we participated in a couple of these conversations. We attended before we participated, and it was intimidating because there was a lot of hard questions being posed to Bob and his team, and until it was our turn to participate, Dr. Sahai, and so I tell you, it was the folks were really demanding, and they wanted to know answers. Biology professors and everybody on campus. There's lots of different kinds of concerns. So really great idea by Bob, and he had a really good way about him. I mean, he would start the conversations with Bob off with stories about him and his family to get people to lean in and develop a rapport. And he'll tell you some more about that.
No, thank you, Frank. In fact, on one, I had to apologize because we had Karen Thomas, also from the Department of Health, and we were told she couldn't answer certain questions because she's a state official. And we tried to censor the questions. And actually, I got people who were angry. They just were mad. They reported to the president. What good is this? So on my next conversation with Bob, even after I apologized one-on-one with the person, I apologized to the whole community. I said, man, I just did not run that correctly. I needed Dr. Thomas to say I cannot answer that question, as opposed to not asking the question. So I learned, right? I'm just a facility guy. But I tell you, now I'm going to ask this question, but I'm going to hold off because I got to share with you my biggest prize. And that's what I call bridges of understanding. So this fella on the left is a microbiologist. He wins all the best teacher awards, and he loves his students and all, and he really didn't want to come back. He thought it was going great remotely. And through all of this, we are best friends. Do you know? He says, Bob, we're meeting, we have to visit every week. So every Friday, 12 to 12:30, we just visit. I learned about his growing up in Chennai, India. I've been to Chennai, India. I actually taught finance in Chennai, India in another life. And, you learn each other's stories, right? And you know where people are coming from. Here's the other one that made me feel like this was all worthwhile, guys. This was one of our executive deans just before. So we had already we got through the fall semester. No one died. And I'm not being facetious there. You know what I mean? So successful, they taught. We still did remote. I want you to know that. And they also flexed, right? So if some students got sick, they could attend by Zoom. Technology was great. We're still doing all the modalities. I don't even know what they mean. Synchronous, asynchronous, you probably know what they mean. We're doing all of that. But face-to-face was successful. He came by just before winter break, dressed as Santa, and he said, Bob, I gotta thank you. Thank you for helping us get through this. And this is the message I wanted to share with you today, where some of my lessons learned in summary, man, how many at times you just wanted COVID to go away, right? For me, it was Saturday night, 10 p.m., when a student just reported they were positive in our Belgrade campus, and they want it disinfected and opened up by Monday. You just want it to go away. Finally, I realized they ain't going nowhere. Lean in. I went to the haters. Taylor Swift's song was in the back of my mind. And then these forums for dialogue. Do you know the president? I said, hey, I think it's time to stop. I went to my president contact person. She goes, Bob, the president says, no, we need these. The community needs conversations with Bob. And then listen, learn, and then act. Don't act before you understand. Long-term commitment to healthy buildings, right? Because we've all knee-jerk done stuff. Guys, this has helped us get started. Palm Beach State will never be the same. This is a culture, remember? A culture of, and then partner with experts and who deliver. And again, Pure Air has been just a great partner for us. And we've had others working with us too, but they've really helped make a difference. And they're still working, we're still remediating. Now, the moving from reactive to proactive, we've had a little test going on. When they go in and clean air handlers, they come back in their reports at how it's been maintained. And we've carried that over to our techs and all. And then integrate your facility management. You can't do it alone. I actually told faculty on one of those calls, I said, if you sit around in your classroom and you see your sanitizer empty and you wait to see how long it is before we come fill it, we're going to fail. You have to let us know when that sanitizer's empty. So gang, we're out of time.
Well, one more thing, Bob, before we go. So you all heard that I used to be a professional wrestler. When I was a kid, I was a huge fan. Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, Hacksaw Jim Duggan. And all I wanted to do since I was 6 years old was win the World Wrestling Federation Heavyweight Championship. I actually got a chance to win the Florida Heavyweight Championship a couple years ago. And that was really cool. I got to have a belt, like the old guys. So we thought today it would be appropriate, because of Palm Beach State College's commitment to the Healthy Buildings program and Bob's leadership, to present Palm Beach State College with its own Healthy Buildings Championship belt.
Whoa.
Bob, come on over here. Let's get you to hold that.
Whoa.
Thank you, everybody. It was a pleasure having you here. We'll stay around for some questions if anybody has any questions. And Pierre is over at booth 505. And obviously, Bob will be here all day, too. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Oh, my gosh.